Councilman Whitman.
Aaron, I'm going to put you on the hot seat.
Please. Do you want Mr. Gall to make his presentation first, or would you?
No, well, the first question I have deals with performance-based contracts. Okay, you talked about activities that the organization is going to go through. And activities are not part of a performance-based contract. And I'm taking that directly from the Office of Fiscal Management. Let me define it for you, because I've worked with performance-based contracts before, and I don't see in this performance-based contracts, I see activities. Performance-based contracts, and this is quoted from the federal government, identify expected deliverables, and I don't see expected deliverables in here. Performance measures or outcomes. Now in the federal government they talk about it, and of course the federal government is no great example of anything, but payment is contingent on a successful delivery. Performance-based contracts also use appropriate techniques which may include but are not limited to consequences or incentives to ensure that the agreed upon value is received. And then it goes again and emphasizes results related to output, quality, and outcomes rather than how the work is performed. And I see in here a non-performance-based contract.
Okay. Maybe in a way it's semantics, and I apologize if that's a term that we used inappropriately. I apologize. There are expected deliverables. There are things that they will report to you on a semi-annual basis.
But what are they?
Those are the same reporting standards that the Las Vegas Regional Economic Development Council has. Those are the same ones that the city of Mesquite presently has. And if you'd like, I can enumerate those. I have those. Give me just 1 second. Startup businesses assisted, existing businesses assisted, business leads, qualified prospects, site visits, successful relocations, loss/non-relocating companies, businesses financing / academic grants, import-export assistance, foreign direct investment, businesses assisted research projects, RDA referrals, and redevelopment. Those are the standards that everyone in the region adheres to in the sense of reporting, and the state requires them as well.
Any further questions for Mr. Baker before we go to Mr. Galt? Go ahead, Councilman Hafen.
Just for clarification, I mean, what you just read is basically what you're talking about with activities, that you're gonna, with the performance-based. I mean, we're not talking about, I went to McDonald's, had fries, I mean, we understand what we're talking about with activities. We're talking about deliverance of business.
Correct.
I mean, going back to your mission statement, I mean, and the other thing I'd like to add with that is we're not talking about, we're gonna bring in a business, gonna compete against one that's here. We're talking about bringing something that's not here.
Value added. Value added means we bring in outside money and it goes back out of the region.
Thank you, Councilman Gustavson.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this, of course, is to have a public-private partnership. You've done a good job of defining over the next 3.5 years, we're going to spend $665,000 of public money, but I don't see any projection or giving us any kind of a clue what you might be able to bring in private funding. 665 to me sounds like an awful lot of money. But it wasn't, you know, if you go back a couple of years ago, it's when you were doing salaries and stuff, it was a little bit different time, but right now, we don't know how long this is going to be in this, you know, even for a half a year, we're looking at almost $100,000.
I think
so. How much money is going to come in privately, and when's that going to start, and how are we going to generate that?
that'd be a question.
Plan for it, I guess.
That'd be a question for Mr. Galt to answer. I don't want to speak for him. What I can speak to though is on the city side. If you compare the numbers, what we've historically.
I don't want to compare the numbers. I want to know where the public. We know where the public money is coming from. Where's the private money going to come from?
I'll have to defer.
And what's
Mr.
the
Galt.
plan for it? You know, and when are we going to start bringing some of that in?
Come on up, Mr. Galt.
I'm sure you have a plan. I just like to hear it.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, Council, George Galt, Mesquite. Mayor, should I respond to the question first or do my little
Please do,
presentation?
respond to the question
Okay.
first and then,
Well, as we went through our deliberations, it's pretty clear that there's not private money out there lurking unless we have some success, and we've got to get started somehow. The only way we see to do that, and we reported this to you earlier, is to use the public money to get us going. And we have had some initial conversations with some of what we would consider stakeholders, same as every other economic development company in the world does, and that is utility companies, realty companies, people who benefit from growth in the community. We've started those conversations, but until we know whether we have an organization, we're not going to go out and try to get everybody stirred up. Our plan is to methodically work our way through all those groups. But, I mean, it's a process like everything else, and you got to start somewhere.
So I guess then, from the other chart we showed up there, it's not up there anymore. If not, the first, in our book, you've got the first 3.5 years, but it looks like this is a perpetual thing that's gonna go on. Is that, you anticipate over a period of time, the money required from the city will start declining somewhat, or is it gonna
Yes.
continue to be these large amounts?
Certainly, it's going to continue to be a major amount, but I think at the end of 4 years, we anticipated that we would have been raising about $75,000 a year. Is that right? The budget shows a declining public participation.
Councilman Rapson?
This may be for Aaron. Are you familiar with a guy named Scott Hershey in St. George? Okay, George, you apparently know him too.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that situation similar or dissimilar than what we're proposing here?
Actually, Aaron and I looked at that budget this evening, in fact, and if you take out the two major events, the business incubator and the annual conference that he has, the budget's almost exactly the same.
And the reason I asked that is I had an opportunity when I was consulting with a company that was looking for an aircraft operation in St. George Municipal Airport. There's a lot of moving pieces. There was the airport, the FAA, there was the city of St. George, which included the city manager, the mayor, the city council, the city engineer, and funding potential for the lease, for the dirt work that was involved to build this facility. Scott Hershey was, is my understanding, a private citizen. I think he worked for the...
Works for the Washington County Economic Development Group.
Yeah, and that's a public-private deal.
Right.
So he was the lead that we were introduced to, and he helped us through this process. He introduced us to the right people. And what I found was there was very little politics involved at this point. It was simply, how can we help you get the information you need to see if we can complement each other in this process.
Right.
And I thought it was a very good process. It was a very helpful process for people. We didn't know anything about St. George or Utah rules. It was, it worked. Sadly, we couldn't get investors into the business, but
Yeah.
it wasn't their fault.
Yeah. And those are the kind of deliverables we're talking about here. Setting up an office, hiring a staff person, developing the marketing materials, putting a community profile together, putting together the list of requirements of what it takes to do business in the state and in the city and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Maybe Mr. Galt would like to attempt a presentation for 5 seconds. Councilman Rapson, do you have another question?
Yeah, I mean, the money's a lot of money. But we're spending a lot of money doing what we're doing, which has not been very effective, in my opinion. And we've been chasing some pretty big rainbows out here, and frankly have scared off some viable businesses through the political process. And I think that this reduces that potential. And I think that if we are successful, you are successful in bringing one, not even significant, but let's say medium-sized business in here, the financial impact of this community, whether it's through payroll and the recirculation of payroll and the property taxes and the spending in the community is important to understand, and there is a value to the city for that. And if we've been unable to do it, might be time for somebody to try it and have a success. Anyway, that's,
And certainly, you know, part of our goal is to begin to diversify the economy as well. And the tourism is great, you always want to support as they used to say, you want to dance with the girl that you brought to the dance. You want to support tourism any way you can, but you also want to have more than one leg in your economic stool. So